proportions now. Proportions are literally equations that show two ratios are equal to one another. Okay? If you're at this point in your GED packets, you've worked through equivalent fractions. Proportions are very similar. They're, in fact, almost identical. So, let's work through some. Okay? Again, when we see proportions, are typically recipes are a great example of proportion when we use proportions. I have a good family recipe that I love for clam chowder. It, however, makes a ton of clam chowder. It's made for family gatherings. So if I'm just making some for me or my fiance, we don't need a 10-gallon pot of clam chowder. So I have to figure out how to make it smaller. That's where proportions come in handy, okay? You can use this also for cake recipes, is really good. I have a dinner recipe for a chicken divan that makes a lot of food that we just don't need for the two of us, so having it usually helps, okay? But I can't just divide everything by 2, it doesn't quite work out that way. Sometimes you need to use these proportions to help, okay? Proportions. So, you start off with ratios, okay? If a cake recipe, for example, calls for 3 eggs and 5 cups of flour, okay? Now there's my eggs on top. I'm going to label that section. That's my eggs. My lower section is my flour. This is very important because when I write out my next one, my eggs also has to go on top and my flour on bottom. They have to be in the same spot. Last video I talked about how important this was. This is important. If it's not the same, it will mess up your math, okay? So, they will tell me, typically in a word problem, okay, that a cake recipe calls for 3 eggs for every 5 cups of flour. 3 eggs for every 5 cups of flour. That's a ratio, okay? They would tell me, or they will ask me, how many cups of flours do I need to use if I'm using 8 eggs? And my flour is unknown. I don't know what it is. If you want to, you can put a question mark there, but in math, typically we put a letter, because letters are, we don't know what the number is yet, okay? And it's a good time to get used to seeing letters in your math. You'll see them a lot when we hit algebra. I'm going to just put an X. It literally means, I don't know what that is. It could be any number, so I'm going to put an X there. Just as a space, as a filler, okay? So, I've got 3 over 5 is equal to, because proportions are always equal, okay? If it doesn't come out equal, something is wrong. 8 over X, okay? So in this case, I'm using 8 eggs. I need to figure out how many cups of flour I'm going to need. This one I'm using 3 eggs and 5 cups of flour. They have to be the same. They have to be equal. So there's a couple different ways you can figure this out. Some of them, in my opinion, are easier than others. Okay, I'm going to show you the method I prefer first, and then I'll show you a couple of different methods as well. So, the method I prefer, the method they teach you in the packet. You cross multiply. You multiply, I'm going to switch colors on my pen so you can see this a little easier. Multiply across 5 times 8. Okay, 5 times 8 will give me 40. Alright, that's 5 multiplication dot times 8 gives me 40. And notice I haven't used my 3 yet. So I divide by the remaining number. Divided by 3. Okay, that equals my x. That's what my x is. It's 40 divided by 3. Okay, I don't want to leave it as a fraction because it's already in a fraction, right? So I can actually work this out. It's going to give me at least 10. 10 times 3 is 30. Right, you can work this out long division as well. Because we want to be able to do this without a calculator. Okay, it's very important that we do this without a calculator as much as we can. It will give us practice. I have a remainder of 1. Remember, I have a 13. It's my whole number. My remainder goes back over that fraction. Okay? Fractions work for recipes. It's fine. If it's going back into another fraction, this works. I can do 1/3 of a cup, right? I can't really do 40 thirds of a cup. I can, but can you imagine sitting there with 1/3 of a cup doing it 40 times? It takes a long time. 13 cups and 1/3 cup, right? So that makes this equal. That is one method. I believe that's the easiest method. However, your brain may work differently, and you may go, that doesn't work for me. Okay? That's fine. If your brain works differently, let's work this through it a little bit differently, okay? Grab my eraser here. Erase this. We're going to start back from our original equation. We should get the same answer. Remember that answer is 13 and 1/3, okay? We should always come up with the same answer. So, the other way to do this is, it actually works out to be exactly the same method, but it's an algebraic formation, okay? Some of you may understand algebra a little bit better than your peers already, and you can do it this way, okay? In this case, we're going to cross multiply both of them, and we're going to write them on opposite sides of our equal sign, okay? 3 times x gives me 3x, my equal sign. 5 times 8 gives me 40. In this case, you're going to solve for the x, my unknown, okay? Algebraically, if we do this, in order to move from one side to the other, we do the opposite, okay? This is 3 times x, so we're going to do the opposite of multiplication. And divide by 3, and we have to do it on both sides. Now you notice I end up with 40 over 3 again. Same number I ended up with before, okay? Being able to do this portion here is something you will run into in algebra. We'll cover it again. If this confused you right now, ignore it. Okay, if the previous one worked, stick with the previous one. That's fine. No need to stretch too far on this one right now, okay? This is another method to solve it. You come up with the same answer. Alright. So, I've heard this asked before, and it is a valid question. What if my number is on the bottom instead of the top? So what if they tell me they want to know how many eggs we use if we use 12 cups of flour? So my x is on top. You do the same thing, you're just going to do it the opposite direction. In this case, I'm going to do multiply across from top to bottom this time instead of from bottom to top. So 3 times 12, right? 3 times 12 will give me 36. I'm going to divide by the number I didn't use. Divide by my remaining number, divide by 5. Okay? And that will give me an answer. In this case, it's going to be, let's work out long ways. You guys can practice for this. As soon as you guys already know the answer, I'm sure. 5 won't go into 3, right? Put your 0 here. If you don't need to put your 0 there, don't. I need the placeholder because my brain doesn't like the blank spots, okay? In this case, if you know multiplication tables, this will be easy. Otherwise, go by 5. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35. 35 works. 40 doesn't, so it has to be 7. 35. And I have a remainder of 1. I know 5 won't go into that remainder, so I have a fraction left over, right? My whole number is whatever's up here. This one goes back over my fraction. So if you struggled with those fraction problems, go back, review them, redo them if you need to, okay? Fractions are important. They will be important from this point on. You will never not see fractions, okay? So this is my answer for this one. My x will be 7 and 1/5. Okay? So regardless of whether you're missing numbers on top, you're missing numbers on bottom, you multiply diagonally, and you divide by whichever number you haven't used yet. That will give you your last piece of your